we really played physical, good football Saturday night. And you always want to measure yourself against good opponents too. You know, you can always look good against anybody out there, but you want to measure yourself based off what you got done, and that's what I walk away from that game seeing. I thought we played very well, and what makes you mad is you play very well, but you don't have a win behind it. But at the same time, then I go up against what we were up against, and I could throw those factors into it. So, yeah, if you throw in just the UNI football team on the field and how they played the other night, that's what makes it very promising, because on the backside of it, you throw in who wasn't on the field and all the things that we faced throughout the season, and we still look like that at the end of the season. So yeah, there's a lot there, and that's what makes it. That's what makes you look forward to what to do in the next 3 months.
As of last Tuesday, 85 teams were still playing, 42 were not. Now, not all those are like official opt-outs. Some of those are just, the last couple games ended up canceled or whatever. But just hearing that number or knowing those numbers, I'm just curious to get your evaluation of this spring season in its entirety.
Well, from my standpoint, it was the hardest thing. The challenge this year for us was consistency for all reasons that were out of your control. And the consistency being not having your entire team, not always because of injury, because of COVID. So you lost players late in the week. You're going to lose players in football anyway due to injury. But when you lose them late in the week and the quick adjustment at the end, that creates some consistency challenges. Facility-wise, it was, we practiced at every different time of the day in every different facility out there. Totally out of everybody's control, because every sport was playing. There's only so many buildings you can be in, and plus there was shows and things that we had to put on the dome. So we did not get a consistent time or place to practice as much as even when you hit the practice field, you couldn't get a time or practice consistency as even lining up a scout team because of numbers. So then you had to cut your practices in half. So all those challenges you had to overcome without making them a problem. That means move on. Don't talk about them or worry about them, because deal with them. And so I go back to your question. Everybody, well, I'm just speaking for us. That's what we dealt with. So when we get to the end here and we had, 30 guys out, it wasn't if you're going to play, it was how you're going to accomplish and find a way to win with losing or missing some guys on your team. How are you going to fill those voids, and how are you going to create a plan that gave everybody a chance to win? So through all that, yeah, there was a lot of scrambling going on throughout the week, and a different kind of scramble every week. But it also makes you wiser, it makes you stronger. I look at it as a positive thing is it creates a different challenge of how to overcome. So it makes you a better coach if you can take what you have and make something of it instead of worrying about what you don't have. I'd say the same thing for the players. I think that's why other teams opted out, is they didn't take the time to create something for the players they had, because it was a lot easier to opt out probably. And I don't even mean it in a bad way. It's like there is a safety factor out there, because every time I designed a plan, it was also a safe factor. Is, yeah, we can play this, but is it the right thing to do for the players that we have, in football? So those are all the things I went through in my head. I don't know if I answered your question, but I think that's what all of us dealt with this whole spring, because FCS is different than BCS. Here's where the numbers showed up. BCS gets 85 guys plus probably 105 to 125 guys on their teams. So when you get to spring and you lose that number, it's depleted. Well, every spring we're depleted down to about 70 guys to start with, and then you start adding the injuries and the COVID on top of 70 instead of 104. You lose the backups in a hurry, and that starts to apply to special teams, and it's all those things start to multiply very quickly in the spring that you probably have better answers for in the fall because of numbers. So I think that's what's really showing up and being magnified when you're watching FCS attempting to play through the spring.
Mark, have you talked to the team as a whole about getting vaccinated? Because obviously that's a personal choice for everybody. I think a big reason for my question is I can envision, because of what we're seeing in some other sports, like Major League Baseball comes to mind, where perhaps a certain threshold of your roster will need to be vaccinated to perhaps avoid, weekly testing in the fall. Now, we don't know it's going to play out that way, but that's kind of, the nature of where my question comes from on whether or not you've had any sort of level of conversations with your team about the vaccine.
I have not made any conversation. I mean, this is our first day that we've actually say we're done. So we'll look. We've already had discussions staff-wise of what we need to do immediately this week, and then start to think about, where to progress in the weeks to come. But when you're talking the vaccines, there's a lot more there than football when you start talking vaccines. There's a lot more people involved, because those are personal choices. They're universities' policies. There's a lot of things that will apply to this when that decision is going to be made. So I'd hold my thoughts until I understand what the makeup of all this is before I would require anybody, even though you can advise. To me, that's something that is a personal choice, and I know our university is doing something as early as this week that to help the whole entire campus get vaccinated, which I think is a very positive thing before they go home to their own community. So there's a lot there for other people that are probably a lot sharper than I am about that, of what the right thing to do is.
Oh, so what's next? Because obviously there's no typical spring practices. What does the calendar look like in the near term for Panther football?
Oh, we're only like 2 weeks from finals right now. So we got to get in. We got to make sure that academically that we need to finish strong. I know that we also need to take time away from football right now, just like any spring. But I think we need to start getting on a normal schedule now to start planning. Like, okay, if that was our spring game the other night, then what do we do after the spring game? It's actually a week earlier right now. So now I always look at the upside. That gives us an extra week of before normal spring season over. We're done 1 to 2 weeks prior to that. So we just gained 2 weeks. So let's make sure we finish what we started here. Let's make sure we finish academically, start to plan for our summer training, and get back to a normal schedule after this 2-3 week time period off, that we get back into our regular routine, with some exceptions, of course, because of where we're going to be at physically, body-wise, is a little bit different than probably what we normally would have been on April 17th of last year. So I think it'll be more normal, is what I'd like to get them into, is a normal schedule and a normal calendar year, so they can start to prepare for when their first game is again, and understand what we're going to do this summer and how we're going to get there.
So when officially can you have contact then again?
Contact with our players?
Yeah.
Right now, we can have contact through them. It's just, the amount of hours you can spend with them. But right now, they just need time off. I mean, they don't need the weight room. Rest and recovery is just as important as anything else, and probably more so this year, the training room, to really go down and spend the time in the training room, because we can't afford to make an error in the training room right now. That being diagnosing all the issues now, when we still have enough time to do what we need to do. If there's anything out there that needs to be fixed, let's get it fixed, but we can't afford to we're up against the clock right now, where normally you're not against the clock so much. You got time after a season. Now you're up against the clock of the next season, and that's the last challenge, and maybe the biggest challenge to hurdle of playing in the spring is coming off injury-plagued season or one injury. When is that recovery time? Because then it affects your weight room time and your development time, which is going to add up when you hit August. So that's probably the biggest thing we need to really take a hard, serious look at to make sure there's no errors in that recovery time for our players.
How impacted do you anticipate the roster being from the transfer portal? And we could ask this question every year at this time, but it just seems like it's more amplified right now, because I think we talked about it a week or two ago a little bit with where things are with the transfer phenomenon.
We're learning every day and watching what happens across the country. So it's like you said, I think that's going to be in line with everything else that's challenging. Is how does it affect us, and how will we use it? And I think that's all things that are on the table. That it's a challenge that we're processing right now, and we'll make the adjustments as we see best fit. But yeah, to me that's a learning curve that we're all in right now.
And then final one I have today, Coach, is a couple weeks ago I had David Harris on my radio show, and the reason for having David on, among talking a few other topics, was you entered this spring season in the final year of your contract. So I asked David about that on the show, and in so many words, he did indicate that an announcement would be coming soon. That, he said, it was about a couple weeks ago he was on my show. He said in about a week and a half, 2 weeks, there'd be an announcement on a contract extension for you. So I can understand that because there's nothing official from the university yet, you might not want to comment, but I just wanted to put that in front of you and ask if you would like to make any comment on what David had to say.
No, I just finished up coming out of a meeting. I'm late because I just came out of a meeting with my staff about the North Dakota State game, and quite frankly, here's what I'll tell my team this afternoon: is the only reason when I've got to be careful with the word. The only reason I'm still mad about the game is because of how well we played, and because I know how close we are and what this team has the ability to do by what I just saw of how they played with one hand behind their back the other night. And for that reason, it just gives me the focus on this team is to get them on the course for the first game of next season to come out like we ended this season, because that will be the advantage of playing in the spring if we can find a way to get our team to this point for the first game of next season. So that's where our focus is, and I'll deal with the rest when the rest comes. Because here's the other thing I'd say: we should really we got to thank, and I seriously thank, the people within this administration that got us to the field. I mean, you look at the COVID testing, I told you all the challenges. We can say that there's no consistency, but through all what we did, it was only because of the hard work of other people just to find the fields to practice on, to get the COVID testing done, to get the results back as fast as we could. It took a community effort for finding places to play. It took a hospital effort to get us to test at 125 people and get the results back quickly. It took phone calls, whether you're getting the phone call you're losing a player at 7 o'clock on Friday morning. Man, there's a lot of work behind that it was all out of our control. So I would say the things we ought to be talking about is the people that overcame all these challenges to get our football team on the field, and that was our staff here. I've mentioned the name, whether it's Justin Schimmel, whether it was Stacia, whether it was David Harris behind that, leading that charge and making sure that was a priority. All those things played into it. Heck, I'll go to Brooke and trying to manage facilities around here. Brooke and Trent, nobody ever mentioned their names. Try to run the facilities where you're rolling up the turf for the sports show and rolling it down for a game and then rolling it back up on Sunday morning for the wrestling meet. Whatever it was, it took a team to pull it off. And that's why I think our athletic team here won this COVID period. And because they put the teams on the field and the teams played like UNI plays. Now, they may not get the wins UNI gets, but they played with the toughness and passion that this place is about. So for that, that's why I say we all won the COVID period. Now, this period's over. Let's get on with life here and get back to what we all think is normal, and that's getting back on the fields the way we want to get back on it. And the other thing is, I'll tell you, is all these facilities going on here. There's a lot of good stuff happening around here that's going on that nobody sees, because by the fall you'll see a lot of things that will be the result of the work that's been done in behind closed doors.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.